right, welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us yet again for another teaching of the Mazzaroth. Today we are going to be discussing Taurus the Bull. Now, if you are new here, we are discussing the biblical story in the stars, known as the Mazzaroth from the book of Job, which the enemy has hijacked and made into that paganized form of worshiping the stars and seeing how they can influence your life. But if you've missed our past videos, you can review them on our YouTube channel or on our Explore page. I will have that Explore page linked down below in the YouTube description. For those of you on Zoom, I've added it in the chat. But just a reminder, our goal here is to return the stars to their original evangelistic intent. So I invite you to set aside any past thoughts, preconceived ideas, anything around astronomy, astrology, etc., zodiac. I also invite you to bring the Holy Spirit along with you on this journey to help you guide these thoughts around this subject, because it's only by the Holy Spirit's power and guidance and truth that the truth can be revealed. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat for those on Zoom. For those on YouTube, feel free to drop them in a comment. If you want to email me specifically on that Explore page that we'll see here in just a second, you can email me as well. So let's go ahead and get started. Again, for those who are new here, my name is Dylan. I am 29 years old. I have a passion for astronomy and technology. And as I was learning astronomy, the Lord spoke to me and was telling me a little bit more about how astronomy actually ties into the Bible deeper. And ever since then, it's just been an awesome, wild ride, as you'll likely see today. So as far as that Explore page goes, this is kind of what it's going to look like. It's going to be the home for everything. It's going to be all of our past videos. We even have some PDF downloads that are quick reference sheets for each of the constellations and their 3 deacons that help tell their story. That way you can have a quick reference sheet either while you're watching, either hand out to a friend that you think might be interested, or if you just want to reference back and wonder what a specific sign was about. Again, if you want to email me, my email is on here. We also have an email list there. That way you can sign up for our reminders and our recaps. You can also scan this QR code and it should take you to that page as well. So with that, let's go ahead and pray before we get ourselves into the first sign of Taurus. So Father God, I want to thank you so much for this time. Thank you so much for guiding us and teaching us and expanding our knowledge upon you in more areas than just one. It's fascinating to learn more about you and see how your nature is just absolutely everywhere. It's so hard to throw a stone without even seeing your nature, even though the stone itself in our hand is your nature too. I ask that you would give us the spiritual ears to hear what you want us to hear and block out anything else that is not of you, Lord. We ask that you would protect this time, open our eyes and hearts, let the word speak loud and throughout this call. And anything that is not of you, let it just fall away and not be a burden or a bother to us whatsoever. We ask all these things in Jesus' precious and mighty name. Amen. All right. So in the past, we covered how God made the world, but he needed a steward to govern it. So he made humanity. But humanity was deceived and sin entered the world, released upon the world, and things that God didn't intend came upon the world and started wreaking havoc. So to redeem this, he would send a human, the Redeemer Jesus, to redeem us. And that's what we covered in part 1. We saw that the first 4 signs tell of the truth concerning the person and work of the coming Redeemer. In Virgo, we saw his manhood that he would assume. In Libra, we saw the price he would pay for humanity. In Scorpio, we see the battle he would fight. In Sagittarius, we saw the victory he would win. Now, the second 4 signs tell of the results of his redeeming work. Now, if you haven't caught on already, these are the 12 major signs that the world more popularly knows as the zodiac, but they are originally told in the Bible, as we are covering here. Now, that was part 1 where we saw the Redeemer and the work, how he would come into the world and the work he would do. But in part 2, we saw the results of his work. So in Capricorn, we saw the story of the Redeemer is not only about sacrifice, but about the ones he has redeemed. And then in Aquarius, we see after his resurrection, he will pour out his Holy Spirit upon his redeemed, and the whole earth will be blessed. And then in Pisces, we see the multitude seed of Abraham will be like the sands of the sea and the stars of the heaven. The people of God will be blessed and multiply through covenant. And then last week we discussed Aries. Aries is the lamb that was slain and is worthy to receive power and honor as king. He will make his bride righteous, bind the enemy, and remove all power and authority from the devil. His kingdom will come and his will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Now that did conclude part 2. And that means today we are starting part 3. This is the finale. These are the last 4, let's say, chapters in this book that leads to the Messiah's return, the salvation for the earth. So we begin the third book or act of the heavenly revelation. This act is all about completion and consummation in triumph. There is no more suffering, no more sorrow or conflict, no more humiliation or death. The Redeemer will no longer endure the bruised heel. We have come to the glory that should follow. We will see him as coming in power and judge the earth in righteousness and to subdue all enemies under his feet. Like the other two acts, this one is also in 4 parts. Chapter 1 is the prophecy of the coming judge of all the earth. Chapter 2 sets before us the twofold nature of the coming ruler. Chapter 3 shows us the Messiah's redeeming possessions, the redeemed brought safely home, all conflict over. And lastly, the 4th describes the Messiah's consummation triumph. This is the completion of the whole mystery of God respecting our world and race. So with that, let's go ahead and explore chapter 1 of this 3rd part, the finale. So that is Taurus the bull. Now, Taurus is obviously a bull. It is viewed as a bull rushing forward, progressing with an unstoppable momentum. He is seen as having a fierce wrath, and his horns are set against the enemy. And in fact, all variations of this sign have shown this the act of pushing or rushing, no matter what the form of the animal or the creature is. It's always a form of pushing or rushing forward. Now, there's quite a few verses surrounding Taurus, and again, I am only going to highlight the important aspects of each verse. I do highly encourage you to read these yourself in multiple translations to get the full depth of the story there. Again, I have compiled all of those verses into a PDF as a download, so if you want to scan this QR code, you can go there and download that as well. But as for the verses surrounding Taurus, they exemplify Jesus coming again to collect his bride and his people. We see that in John 14. I will come again and receive you to myself. And in Joel 2, he's described as head of the army, forces beyond number. In Revelation 19, it describes armies of heaven following Jesus on white horses. And then in Revelation 13, Jesus comes back to lead his armies. Isaiah 54, the Lord is your husband. That's because he's coming back. He's coming to collect us. We are the bride of Christ. We are his people. We are his body. He's coming to collect us. Additionally, we will be called up to him. We see that in 1 Thessalonians 4, the church being caught up to be with God. And the Lord will pour out his judgment upon the world. We see that in Jude chapter 1, 14 and 15. The Lord is coming to execute judgment upon all and convict all that are ungodly. Psalms 44, they will be pushed down. The enemies will be pushed down. Remember, we were talking about how this bull is always seen in the act of pushing or rushing of some sort. And then Isaiah 13, every evil that is found shall be thrust through. There's that same verbiage. It's not the exact same word, but it's still that pushing or rushing effect. And then Isaiah 34, declare the judgment that comes with the bull. So there's even language in the Bible that talks about the power of a bull and how that's how God's going to come. Now, there is something unique that I'm going to insert here that I don't have imagery for or language on slides for us to exemplify. But in the Bible, it's believed that there was a different form of a bull that is now extinct. There's research on this, although it's not 100% fact proven, except for the fact that they are finally now starting to find some fossilized remains of these super bulls, these bulls that are big. They're believed to be the size of elephants, maybe just a little bit smaller. But the main difference is their horns aren't out like bulls are. You know, like if you think of a bull, most people think of like a longhorn. Being here in Texas, you know, the bull's horns go out sideways and then kind of curve up. Well, these bulls are believed to have long, straight horns. And they went out, very, very similar to what you see in this picture here. They went outward and kind of did a little curve instead of coming, you know, sideways and then forwards, kind of like you would think a longhorn is. But these were called reems in the Bible, R-E-E-M. And I can't remember if that's a Hebrew word or if that's just the translated into English word. But these bulls were seen as strong, powerful, untamable. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, that's what one of the mythological stories surrounding Hercules is. He had to tame the wild ox or the wild bull out of the city of Thebes, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong on that city there. But the reason why that's important is because it's going to play into the imagery here, and I'll explain here in 1 second. But as for Taurus, there were many different names surrounding this constellation, but they all centered around the same definition. So, for an example, the Dendera of the ancient Egyptians thousands of years ago called him Isis. Now, we're aware of this term because of the organization over in the Middle East. But the true name of that, the true definition of that name, Isis, is actually who saves or delivers. So it's kind of ironic the acts that they do compared to the true definition here. The Dendera also calls him Apis, which is the head or the chief. There's also Torhens, which is Chaldee. There's Althor, which is Arabic. Tauros, which is Greek. And then the Latin name we have is Taurus. And then there's the Hebrew word Shur, which means both coming and ruling. So very interesting. All of these names still all meaning the same thing and still exemplifying that same rushing or coming forward of the savior, the deliverer, the chief. Now, there are several Hebrew words for the word bull, but the common term, like I was just talking about, is reem, which conveys loftiness or exaltation and power and preeminence. This word is the root of many different languages as words of the same definition, and interestingly found in Abram's name, High Father or preeminence. So there's a lot of overlay as far as the Hebrew names go, and especially in the Bible too. Oh, and if I didn't clarify, the term reem is often translated as unicorn in the Bible. So if you go to the King James version of the Bible, not the New King James, but the King James version, it will actually use the word unicorn instead. So it's kind of interesting to read about that. But with that, we are going to the star names. So the first star name I have here is Aldebaran. That is one of the more popular star names. You could say that, and astronomers know exactly. You're talking about the eye of the bull or the bull's eye, and it means the leader or governor. And again, that is in that bull's right eye. Then we have El Nath, which is Arabic, means wounded or slain in the tip of the left horn. You see that up there. You have Al Sayon, which is Arabic, the center, brightest star in the Pleiades cluster, which we're going to talk a little bit more about Pleiades here in a little bit. And we have Palel Cilium, which is Hebrew for belonging to the judge, and it is in the Haides cluster here. We're also going to talk about that one just a little bit here. We have Wasat, which is Arabic for center or foundation, also in the Haides. We also have Al Thuraya, which is Arabic, the abundance, also in the Haides. We have Vergila, which is Latin for the center, and again is in the Haides. Now, as far as Pleiades go, Pleiades, the term literally means congregation of the judge or ruler. So I thought that was really cool. We're going to come back to this a little bit more when we get into the meaning of it all. But the Hebrew name for this is Kemah, which means the heap or a culmination. And it's actually used in Job 9:9, Job 38:31 and 32, and in Amos 5:8. And it's referring to the group or like the congregation or like the church itself. We also have Sukkoth, which is Syriac, which means booths, Booths. And it is positioned perfectly in the neck of Taurus. Now, I did say we were going to talk about these star cluster here, Haides. It is its definition also is the congregation, and it's positioned on the face of the bull. You can see it's kind of like near that snout between the eye and the mouth there. So now with Taurus, its meaning is very unique, especially given the Pleiades and the Haides clusters there. Everything points to and reveals the coming one who will collect his body unto himself before he comes to destroy all his enemies and judge the world in righteousness. There's nothing in the church, there's nothing of the church revealed here other than we are in the forefront of his mind, seen in the Haides. And we are the center of his love or his heart in Pleiades. If you'll notice, it's based off of this picture, it doesn't look exactly like it's near the heart there, but most depictions, which I'll show you in the software over there, it generally shows this a little bit lower in the chest of Taurus there. But it's depicting that same, these are representing the church and it's near his heart. We are the heart, the center of his love, the center of his heart. Pleiades is the saints securely supported by the terrible judge who together with the holy angels move with him and his inflictions upon the guilty world. The church will be caught up to meet the Lord in the air, to be forever with the Lord. And that's 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. The Lord is coming. So I thought that was a awesome revelation to see that the church is not only in his heart, but it's also in the forefront of his mind. You know, the Haids kind of depict that we are there in his mind, and we're not forgotten. He's always thinking about us. We're at the center of his heart. Um, Now, as far as in the natural goes, there's a few things here. We have 144 stars, excuse me, 141 stars and two star clusters, which we just talked about, the Pleiades clusters and the Hyades. And it's best seen from November to February. But there's a little bit of mythology surrounding this. These signs were appropriated to the 12 tribes of Israel, all the Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, all the way back to Leo. Each one of them was given to a tribe group, which is another subject that I would love to explore and teach on here. But for the time being, Taurus was given to Joseph, the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh. And you can see that in Deuteronomy 33:17. But we see the same nature of the bull in Psalms 44, Isaiah 13, saying, they will push down our enemies, and every evil that is found shall be thrust through. And Isaiah 34:26 declares the judgment that comes with the bull. And interestingly, each tribe is assigned a horn as well. So Ephraim is given a horn, and Manasseh is given a horn. And those are significant because one's on the left, one's on the right, and even the left and the right has significance that also relate back to the tribes and their principal meanings and etc. So the last thing I wanted to say about this, more about the natural as opposed to mythological or any cultural things in the past. Taurus is actually the direct opposite sign of Scorpio, which Scorpio we saw as the enemy. And he's the enemy that Ophiuchus and Hercules are crushing. That's what we discussed in Taurus there. But the interesting thing with that is as Scorpio sets, that means Taurus rises. So I thought it was a really cool way that God has set up the story that when the enemy is cast down, setting, the Lord rises. So that was really cool. It's a super cool prophetic image that as as Scorpio goes down, Taurus goes up. So super fun. So let me kind of show you that here in the software. So here you have Taurus. You have the two horns more facing upwards, and you got the Pleiades cluster here in the center of his neck. And then the Hyades are here. A little bit harder to see there. They're not as popularly studied as the Pleiades are here. But we wanted to discuss a little bit more about Pleiades because there's an even deeper, more interesting revelation. Not that the Taurus itself and these 12 signs are not interesting, but the super cool thing about these 7 stars that you see relate to the book of Revelation. So with that, I just wanted to go over a few things. So in Revelation chapter 1, 10, 11, it says, I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day. This is obviously John talking. And I heard behind me a loud voice as of a trumpet saying, I am the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last. And what you see, write in a book and send to the 7 churches, which are in Asia, to Ephesus, to Smyrna, to Pergamos, to Thyatira, to Sardis, to Philadelphia, and Laodicea. So I took all of those churches and I just kind of took a screenshot here. And then I went ahead and labeled them just because, I mean, it's important for us to see their names here. Because again, this is also going to play into Pleiades here. So speaking of Pleiades, I went ahead and took a photo of Pleiades and I went ahead and named the stars. So these are the star names of those that are right next to it. I know it's kind of hard because they're all like stacked on top of each other, but I tried to keep the start of the name next to the star of itself. But I am going to have to do a little bit of doctoring of this photo. So I'm going to rotate the photo, but I'm going to put the names back next to each one. But just don't be alarmed whenever Atlas is no longer down here. It's like over here somewhere. So like you'll see what I'm talking about. I'm going to rotate the photo like 270-ish degrees. So this used to be the right side of the image, and now it's the upper left side of the image. You get kind of what I'm talking about here. But the reason why this is important is because when you overlay these 2 pictures on top of each other, they actually line up perfectly. So Sardis and Alcyone line up. Philadelphia and Atlas line up. Pleione and Laodicea line up. And Astrope and Ephesus line up. And Smyrna and Maya line up. And Merope and Thyatira line up. And Pergamos and Electra line up. Making it a super cool, I mean, revelation of how God can do anything. I mean, he created these stars thousands of years before these churches were even thought of in the human mind. And yet he was still able to ordain these things perfectly. And just to kind of show it just a little bit differently that way, you don't have all that typing on there. There's an image of just, the two, the churches and the stars there.
So one of the things that was hard for me, okay, sorry, this started in May, on May 13th, 2017. May 13th, 2017, the Lord woke me up and said, I want you to go look out the window. And I looked out the window and I didn't see anything specific. I was all about stars and moon. I'm sorry, I was all about planets and the moon and the sun at the time. And so Pleiades wasn't even on my radar. And so I thought, okay, well, there's this really kind of bright cluster here, but that's not a planet. And so I started digging and just making up notes, because the Lord continually started having me look up things in about Pleiades. I mean, and he just kept going. And then that's when I discovered each of the verses were in the Bible that mentioned Pleiades. And I really didn't make any sense of it. And this is what we're trying to help encourage here, that I don't think all of this is by accident. And there's no way I could read all of my notes today that the Lord has taught me about Pleiades. So I'm just going to give you, maybe they're not only the highlights, but maybe they're just like little nuggets to get your creative juices thinking. So we see up to 14 of the stars, depending on your light pollution. But normally you can definitely see 6 and 7. I can always see 7, but now I've been looking at it for a long time. And one of the things that's interesting is I like to get a visual reference. Can y'all kind of see, like in my eye, it almost looks like an angel. Do you see the 2 feet at the bottom?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like when you keep looking, like if the Lord moves y'all to go and be looking at Pleiades for whatever revelational reason, he's going to have somebody else do this. I know 2 other people that the Lord is talking to him or them about Pleiades and the church and the end times. So I know I'm not the only one. There could probably be thousands out there, but anyway, so just to help you learn something that took me a long time to figure out the visual references, the 2 stars at the bottom remind me of the foot of an angel. So then I can get my perspective on where it is in the sky and how it's like my perspective. I'm looking at it from a different view. But like Dylan said, there's just so many things. Like Pleiades is also called the flock of doves. And then the verse that goes along with that is Psalms 24. And there's just lots of scriptures in there that just line up with that. Hold on just a minute. Like I said, I have lots of notes. There's just no way I could share them all today. But like some of the stars I have found have characteristics of the church that is described in Revelation.
Does anybody have questions or anything they want to ask or comments surrounding that before we move on to Orion?
This may show my geographical ignorance, but what country is that? Is it
It's
Greece? Is it something else?
it's modern day Turkey.
Oh, okay. Okay. Oh, right. Ephesus would be in Turkey. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I had the same question.
So the name of the town that Lydia came from and Denise has just described in modern day Turkey is called what?
Akullar, Aklar.
Yeah.
Let's see if I can get it.
No, that's fine. I can probably figure it out. But what was it called during biblical times, like when John was writing? Oh, there it is. Yeah.
It's Akhisar.
Akisar. Great. Okay, thank you.
And it was called Thyatira. Denise said it better than I. Thyatira.
Oh, Thyatira. Okay. And that was one of the churches.
Yes.
Okay. Very good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's another thing. Quite a few of them, their names have changed. Just a minute. So Thyatira is one of them.
Denise, when
Well,
you
no, there
fade
were-
away, we can't hear you.
But there was
Awesome.
there was a slide that came up that showed the modern name and the church name already. So it just saves me a bit of time going back.
Yeah, it's Thyatira and Akhisar.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Okay.
Ephesus has also been called Artemis.
Oh, has it? Okay.
Mm-hmm. That was a major god there in biblical times that they wrestled with.
Yeah.
And then Pergamus was also called Bergama, Bergama.
Yeah.
And then we talked about Theraterra.
And that was
Yeah,
another thing
that's
that
it.
we were thinking through was, did these cities slowly migrate based off of, just the building of cities and kind of just how cities kind of grow in an area. It might show just a little differently. Like, I don't know if Philadelphia is um, really out here, and if Alice here is still there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
But
But the thing is, though, is that this is excellent because it shows the modern name as well as the biblical name.
mhm.
And you can spend a lot of time looking for this information, and I have.
Oh yeah,
And so this is what's excellent about this is I rewatch this video and screen capture or download the actual slide because it's excellent.
definitely.
And one more thing, Smyrna is now Izmir. Izmir.
Right.
All right. So that is Pleiades, the seven sisters. Another interesting thing, kind of surrounding the mythology of Pleiades and the Hyades, is they were actually known as stepsisters to each other. Something surrounding their father, the Pleiades, his father's. His name was Atlas, which, yes, that's also the name of one of these stars as well. But something surrounding their father being related to the Hyades. I'm still trying to pronounce that correctly. They are technically related to each other. Oh, here we go. They're there. Um, and so technically they are sisters to each other, which kind of comes back to that dual nature of like the fishes. See, like whenever you zoom in on the hides, it doesn't really give like that vibrant color of the Pleiades that we do. But again, the Hyades and the Pleiades coming together, kind of creating that two forms of the church. That's kind of like that two forms of Pisces. There's two different fishes that represent one and the same thing, but in different forms. The old church, the new church, the Old Testament, the New Testament, etc. So that's kind of another interesting aspect to these star clusters within Taurus. So, but what we're going to discuss next is actually going to be Orion. And I believe everyone is familiar with Orion. In fact, I would be very surprised if this was not the most popular constellation recognized, especially given his 3-star belt that almost anybody could point out. So let's go back and dive into Orion here. So Orion, we have Bible verses about him in Job 9. I mentioned Orion specifically by name, along with Pleiades and Ursa Major, the bear. We got Job 38 mentioning the very same 3 constellations, and as well in Amos 5:8. In Isaiah 60, we see, arise and shine, for your light has come. In Malachi 3, the coming of the branch. And we have Isaiah 42, God has held silent, but will soon cry out. Jeremiah 16 is he has sent fishers out to collect his fish, and then he sent hunters out. And as we can see, Orion is actually depicted as the triumphant prince, also a mighty warrior. Also seen and referred to as a giant, mighty hunter. His left foot is upon his enemy. He is adorned with the most beautiful and famous girdle, which also houses a sharp sword with the handle and hilt in the image of a lamb's head and body. So if you'll notice, I know it's kind of hard, so I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. Look at the handle and the hilt of his sword. Not only is it in the shape of a cross, but there's the lamb's head and there's the body. Isn't that cool? He holds a mighty club in his right hand and the token of his victory in the left hand. So there's the left again. We got the lion's head and skin here, and he's holding the club in triumphant victory. Now we have tons of names surrounding Orion across multiple cultures. We have Hagat, which is Dendera, he who triumphs. We have Orion, which is Hebrew for light, very similar to Orion, which also means light. We have Al-Ghiaza, which is Arabic, the branch. Al-Gabor, Arabic, the mighty one. Al-Mizram, Arabic, the ruler. Al-Najet, which is Arabic, the prince, or the price. And we got, Nifla, which is the mighty one. We have Nux, which is Hebrew, the strong. Heka, which is Chaldee, the coming. And Miasa, which is Hebrew, coming forth. Wow, tons of names. That kind of goes back to show how popular this constellation was and how important this constellation is. which again, we're going to discuss the meaning here in just a little bit. Now, as far as the stars go, a lot of these are actually very beautiful, very vibrant, and very easily noticeable. So the very first one is actually Betelgeuse, the coming of the branch we see in Malachi 3, and that's in the right shoulder. Yes, it is pronounced Betelgeuse. No, it has no relation to the movie. We have Rigel or Rigol. It is the foot that crushes. Also in the left foot, raised over the enemy, ready to crush. We have Bellatrix, quickly coming or swiftly destroying. That's in the left shoulder. We have Al-Natik, which is the wounded one of the 3 stars in the belt there. You see the green arrow pointing to it. You have Saif, which is bruised. It is the same word used in Genesis 3:15, linking Orion to the Messiah prophecy. I remember we talked about that back in Virgo, very same star name, Saif. Al-Ra, who bruises or who breaks, same star that we saw in Cephas in the past video. And we have Thabit, which is Hebrew, and it means treading on. Again, alluding more to that treading over the enemy. Now, what does all of this mean? So coming back to the picture here, his left foot is raised and placed right over the head of the enemy as though in the very act of crushing it. Just like we saw in Scorpio with Hercules and Ophiuchus with his left foot raised over the head of the enemy, Draco the dragon and Scorpio the scorpion. All of the cultural names and star names testify to the Prince of Glory, who was once wounded for all our sins of his redeemed, is about to rise up and shine forth for their deliverance, which we see in Isaiah 42. Now, other mythologies surrounding this sign Orion are numerous, but again, they reflect the true and pure image of Christ. So for an example, Orion was the united gift of the gods Jupiter, Neptune, and Mercury, and had power to walk upon the sea without getting wet. Does that sound familiar? Jesus was a deity given by a deity, able to naturally walk on water and supernaturally walk among and through the world without being wet or soiled by its waters. Another of him going about the land, clearing it for unwanted beasts for his love, and imposed by a scorpion, struck in the heel. Sounds a lot like Jesus coming to rid the world of demons and the enemy's traps and lies and being struck on the cross. So a lot of again, as we've seen in all of the past videos, whenever we discuss the mythologies, you can definitely see how they've altered that story to be more paganized and less biblical viewed. But unfortunately, they don't change it enough. We can see straight through the enemy's plot. Now, in the natural, the Orion Nebula is found at the tip of Orion's sword. So right down here. And you will notice kind of like a line of stars, a little faint, kind of just as bright. To me, it looks just as bright as the Pleiades, just out of place because it's over here, not over here in Taurus. And of course, below the belt. It's one of the brightest nebulas in the sky and one of the nearest star forming regions that's closest to Earth. And it is easily the most studied and photographed object in the sky, the Orion Nebula. This brilliant light displays the beauty and glory of the light that shall break forth when the moment comes, stated in Isaiah 60, verse 1. Arise and shine, for your light has come. This is the light of the world, best seen obviously as Jesus, but we see it in December through March. Another interesting thing to notice is this is the lion skin, which we know as the enemy that goes around roaring like a lion, seeing who he can devour. Another interesting thing is if you notice his eyes, he's looking up towards Taurus, almost as if he's looking at Pleiades, the church. He's looking into Pleiades there. So it's like he's got his eyes and his heart and his mind set upon the church. Super cool. So again, in the night sky, you can see we got Orion here, we got Taurus. Again, you can kind of see that little bit of a view. He's looking at the Hyades, but there's Pleiades as well. And again, like I was talking about, there is that little star cluster here known as the Orion Nebula. Probably the most popularly photographed and visualized and studied. It is the closest to the Earth. It does kind of look just like a muddy cloud in the night sky, but it is still fascinating to study. Because remember, scientists use different forms of photography other than just visual light. They do radio wave light, they do X-ray light, they do all that stuff, and it reveals different aspects because like X-rays can go through that dirt and dust and see a little bit farther behind it. But Still fascinating to examine there. But our next sign is actually going to be right under Orion here, and it's going to be Eridanus, which is actually the river. So you can kind of see it winding down there. And if you'll take one note from me, if you'll notice, look how close it is to Cetus, and look how his paw is. We're going to see that detail here. And excuse me, I am going to go back one step real quick. Let's come back to Taurus for a second. Remember, we were talking about how Taurus was technically a different type of bull described in the Bible than what we know as the bulls or ox of this day. And they were often translated as unicorns. Well, I thought it was kind of ironic that there's a unicorn very similarly and closely positioned here, which we're actually going to see a little bit more about this guy whenever we come to in the next 7 days. There's going to be a lot of interesting facts around what's coming up visually for Menoceros, the unicorn. That's a mouthful. So back to Eridanus. All right. So Eridanus is pictured as a river flowing from the left foot of Orion that is descending upon the enemy. Again, if you'll notice, there's Cetus's paw. We're going to see a little bit more about that there. But how is this viewed in the Bible? We see in Daniel 7, he does describe a fiery river, the river of the judge. And in Psalms 97, it states a fire go before him and burn up his adversaries. In Psalms 50, a fire shall devour before him. Habakkuk 3, burning coals at his feet. Isaiah 30, devouring fire, an overflowing stream of fire, like a stream of brimstone. In Nahum 1, pouring out like fire. Isaiah 66, flames of fire. We're going to see all those come into play in the meaning and the star names and in the deeper details here. So we have one alternative name for this constellation, and it is also the Dendera, the ancient Egyptian zodiac painted on that mural wall, or excuse me, mural ceiling from thousands and thousands of years ago. It is Petat, and it means the mouth of the river, which we're going to see a star name down here. Now, the stars, we have Arknar, which is the after part of the river, and that's the mouth of the river. The definition is the after part of the river. We have Kursa, which it means bent down, and is at the source of the river. We see that with the green arrow there. You have Zorak, which is Arabic, flowing. It's at that second bend of the river here. We got Fiat, which is mouth, and it's like in context, that's mouth of the river. And then Oza, we got the going forth. Now, what's all that meaning? Coming back to all those verses that we just gave from Isaiah and Nahum and etc. This is the river that flows from Orion down out of sight. Cetus is trying to desperately stop this river because it speaks to the lake of fire that he, Cetus, the enemy, the devil, and the wicked will be cast down to. Now, in the natural, we do have 84 stars, and Eridanus is one of the largest constellations in the sky, and it spans quite a large distance. It actually starts near the celestial equator and extends southwardly of Orion. It winds under the feet of Orion and then past the head of Cetus, and it ends at the brilliant star Arknar. But a little bit more like mythology and stories behind this is it is also referred to as the River Po or the River Euphrates. So oftentimes, if that's ever referred to in the Bible, that's kind of what this is kind of helping tell that story of. But the myths surrounding Eridanus state that Helios, the god responsible for leading the sun through the sky, had his son Phaeton with him. Now, Phaeton attempted to take the reins and drive for himself, but he lost control and created this river of fire in the night sky, or excuse me, in the sky. Zeus, attempting to correct this potentially dangerous incident, struck the chariot with one of his lightning bolts, and it cast Phaeton into the fiery river, almost kind of as his punishment. Now, this river has been associated with the fire long before Greeks, as we saw in Daniel 7, 9 through 11, describing a fire of river in the river of the judge. But deeper still, Psalms 97 states a fire will go before him, meaning Jesus, and burn up his adversaries. And then again in Psalms 50, a fire shall devour before him. And more language like that is spoken like we saw in Habakkuk 3, Isaiah 30 and 60 and Nahum 1. So this is that consuming fire, the consumption of the enemy, as if like his, his final decree, you're done, So that one is very interesting. And it kind of comes back to that aura altar that we discussed in the first part of the Mazzaroth series here. And that leads us to our last constellation. We have Auriga. Now, Auriga is seen as a great shepherd seated upon the Milky Way, holding a she-goat and 2 newborn kid goats in his left arm. The she-goat clings to him while looking down at the charging bull, and the 2 kids are bleeding and frightened. He has a band in his right hand, sometimes seen as a set of reins. So it took me a little bit to kind of see these other little goats here, but then there's the she-goat. You can kind of see she's like wrapping her hooves around his neck. But then there's the baby kids there. And I didn't understand the seated upon the Milky Way until I went back into the software. And if you will see here, this is actually pretty interesting. So there's Auriga, and then there's the Milky Way. So it looks like he's resting upon the Milky Way. I thought that was really cool. And then you got the she-goat and the 2 kids, and then the rain or the band that you got there. Which the rain is actually kind of interesting. We're going to see a little bit more about that whenever we get to the mythology of that. But the Dendera also shows a man carrying a scepter with the name Trun, meaning scepter or power. The scepter was unique, with the top having a head of a goat and the bottom extending below his hand, a cross-shaped. Remember, the Egyptians knew the cross symbol as a symbol of life, not the symbol of death that we know it from the Roman torture device. Now, I did try and find a photo of this, and unfortunately I couldn't find one, but it did remind me of the sword that Orion holds, or the sheep head on the hilt. So just coming back to that, it reminded me of this that we just saw a moment ago, where it has the sheep in the body and then the cross shaped. Isn't that kind of fascinating? All right, so Auriga in the Bible, we have Isaiah 40, the Lord will collect his flock. We got the she-goats and the kids in his hand. Got Ezekiel 34, save the flock, no longer a prey. He's going to come to save the flock. And then Ezekiel 37, they shall have one shepherd. Jeremiah 23, they shall fear no more. 1 Peter 5, the chief shepherd. It identifies Jesus as the chief shepherd. With Malachi 4, showing the judgment fire for those that don't follow him, but life and salvation for his flock. Also a word of Esculpus. This was the same verse that we saw when we discussed Esculpus back in the first part of the story. So Auriga stems from the Hebrew word that means shepherd, but in Latin it means coachman or charioteer. But this man has actually never been depicted with a chariot or horses, but has always had goats and a rein in his hand. So the idea that the story changed just because of a name was kind of strange and unique, because the herdsman or the shepherd is more predominantly exemplified throughout the names through here. So speaking of names, let's go into the stars here. So we have Alioth, which is Hebrew, a she-goat, and that's in the body of the goat. And it is also known as Capella by the same name. So if you ever say Capella, more people would know that more than Alioth. But interestingly, it is the 6th brightest star in the night sky. Remember, 6 represents carnality. For example, the humanity minus God, which, we never want, but that's technically what that 6 represents. And that's also why we see this, the sign of the beast as that number. But I also thought it was kind of ironic that the number 6 was inside the she-goat, and the she-goat is technically humanity that Jesus has come to save. So I thought that was kind of, it comes back to that whole 66 stars, 66 books in the Bible, and all those 66s surrounding Aries. It's like the testimony that Jesus is coming for us, for humanity. So I thought that was really fun. We have Minkilnon, which is the band or chain of the goats. It's in the shepherd's right arm, referring back to the band of the fish of Pisces. Hint, hint, hint. This is also referred to as a band. We have Maas, which is a flock of goats. We have El Nath, wounded or slain, and that's in his right foot. That's also the same name we saw in Aries the ram. There was another star name in there named El Nath. And then lastly, we have Gedi, which is Hebrew, and it means kids, in reference to a goat, kid goats. So what is all this saying? What's the meaning here? So this sign is the answer to who may abide the day of his coming. This is the good shepherd, once bruised, Elnoth, that we saw on the right foot, what gave his life for the sheep, brought again from the dead and is now chief shepherd, seen in 1 Peter 5. We see life and salvation for his sheep when he comes to reign and rule and judgment. The connection between Eridanus and Auriga are seen in Malachi chapter 4, verses 1 and through 3. So now here we are again. We got 66 stars, just talking again about how that's kind of the testimony to humanity of Jesus and his nature and his coming. Capella is the sixth brightest star. Again, there's another six doing that testimony to humanity. El Nath is the closest star to the anti-center of the Milky Way galaxy, and that just means the center, the opposite of the center of the galaxy, which interestingly, the center of the galaxy is at the tip of Sagittarius's arrow. Scientists have proven that that is actually the closest to the center that we can see is at the tip of Sagittarius's arrow, which, remember, Sagittarius is Jesus Christ with his arrows. So isn't it God to just point out specifically right where the center of the universe is, or the center of the galaxy is he's like, yep, it's right here, pointing right at it. But super cool there. I did want to expand on the reins or the band here. I thought that was interesting because we saw in Aries actually has his paw across the band of Pisces, kind of saying, I'm the one that's holding this together, and it's only through me that the church is tied and is redeemed. And yet some of the depictions of Auriga shows a band in his hand, not necessarily a bridle or reins. So I thought that was really cool to see that again, each of these signs keep pointing back to a different sign or the same story, but seen in a different way or in a different sign. So again, just really fun nature to keep seeing repeat itself, repeat itself, repeat itself. So, but that is actually the last sign that we are discussing today. That is Auriga. So we got Taurus, we got Orion, we got Eridanus, and we have Auriga. So what is all of this telling us? What is this whole sign of Taurus saying? So the ninth sign of this story tells us when the Messiah returns, he will be unstoppable and he is coming to rule. He was wounded before, but he will not be this time. He is the Prince of Peace and the most glorious in all of heaven. He is the light of the world, and he stands upon the enemy, crushing him with feet of judgment. He will pour out his wrath like a river of fire, and his judgment is set. He brings the sheep of his flock and the bride of his chamber back safely with him. So what a beautiful story. All right. So next we have in the next 7 days, which I guess, let me actually pause here and let me see. Does anybody have any questions or comments that they want to add surrounding these, the constellation of Taurus and the three decans?
I have a question in regards to the animal that it's at the foot
Okay.
of that image. It would be great if you could bring it back up again on the screen.
Are you talking about Auriga, this one?
No, going back to, I think it's Orion, the one with the image with the belt
Oh, yes.
Of the cross and the head of the lamb.
This?
Right. So what is that group called?
It is known as Lepus. And it's actually a very interesting story in and of itself too, because it's seen as a rabbit. And we're actually going to discuss this in another sign.
So when are you going to be discussing that image again? When do you predict you'll be talking about that particular image later?
That's
John?
actually going to be next week. That's going to be in Gemini,
Okay.
the twins.
Okay.
It is viewed as the enemy. So I think you're discerning rightly as far as
Yeah.
the image and its story.
Yeah.
And I've heard through my astronomy classes. I have not seen it through these biblical stories just yet. And if I have, I might have glazed it. But ultimately, I've been told that it actually wasn't supposed to be a rabbit at all. It was a mistranslation because lepus doesn't
Right.
even mean rabbit. But
Right.
again, we'll get more into that story a little bit more.
Yes. Yes. I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
You know.
Perfect.
Good.
Okay, so let's go ahead and go over the next 7 days a little bit too. Most of these are more brilliant, vibrant, nice things to look at. It's unfortunately most of them might require a telescope or binoculars. But so for an example, tonight on Tuesday, March 14th, the moon will reach its third quarter, continuing to wane until the new moon on March 21st, which is actually next Tuesday. And the moon is actually in Scorpio at this moment. Now on Wednesday, tomorrow, The spectacular nebulous of Monoceros, the unicorn, will be a delight to see with a backyard telescope. Interestingly, that this lines up with Taurus, where some of the bulls in the Bible were known as remes that were then translated into English as unicorns. So with that, I went ahead and just took some photos from NASA to show a little bit of what might be visible. So we have the Rosetta Nebula. And again, these are two different ways that they photograph. So for an example, this is like just, Hubble taking a photo of the nebula. But then what they'll do is they'll change the light that they look at. So they'll look at radio waves, they'll look at X-rays, they'll look at infrared, they'll just change it up a bit. So technically these are the same thing. I rotated this one so that it's the same position. So that way you're not like having to rotate your head trying to figure out how it looks. But isn't that kind of cool how it kind of shows those differences there in both color? But then additionally, and all of these, again, are in that Monoceros, the unicorn constellation. So it's really cool to see all these brilliant things inside what could technically be another wild ox, the reem from the Bible. But there's also the Christmas tree cluster. Looks just like a Christmas tree. Look at that one. This one's really cool. It looks like they edited it a little bit to make it look greenish on purpose. I think this is the natural look of it. So this is what it truly looks like if you took your telescope out and looked at it. And then they just kind of did a little bit of editing maybe for this one. I don't know if this is actually like an X-ray view or not, but I know this is infrared. And then the last cluster is actually called the Hubble Variable Nebula. So original. Looks a little bit like a Christmas tree too, but it does look like there's actually a star there, and it's either accumulating all that gas or it's expelling all of that gas. But still cool how it illuminates that for us. And there's another view of it. So, and then we have on Friday, the 17th, the Crab Nebula, northwest of Taurus's southern horn. The Crab Nebula will be great to view. It was first recorded by a Chinese astronomer in 1054 AD and was stated to be visible during both day and night. Isn't that fascinating? I think that's absolutely wild. So let's look at the Crab Nebula. So the Crab Nebula is the most famous and conspicuous supernova remnant in the sky. The Crab Pulsar, a neutron star rotating 30.2 times per second, is in the center of this nebula. Can you imagine? That star is rotating 30.2 times every second. That is so fast. That's wild. But yeah, that's down in there, right in there somewhere. Super crazy. But this does definitely look kind of gnarly looking, how all that gas and dust and dirt is just kind of expelled and colored by that same neutron star. So lastly, what we have is on Sunday, March 19th, the moon and Saturn will be in close proximity at 6:30 a.m. local time, just before sunrise, and they will both be in Aquarius. So it'll take a little bit of getting up early. Unfortunately, the further north you go on the Earth, it's going to be harder and harder to see these without sunlight. But interestingly, if you were on the equator, you'd be able to see this for solid 30 minutes before you even started seeing sunlight. It's kind of crazy how all that works. But with that being said, on Monday, March 20th at about 5:30 Eastern time, 1:30 Pacific time, daylight savings time, I will add, the sun will cross the celestial equator, traveling north, marking the vernal equinox in the northern hemisphere, in the beginning of northern spring. So days and nights will be of equal length on that day, and the sun will rise due east and set due west. At mid-northern latitudes on the March equinox, the amount of daylight added to each day reaches its maximum of 3 minutes. So I thought that was kind of fun to add in there. We are beginning the natural spring come Monday. So that's all I got. I want to thank you guys for joining me. Again, if you have any questions, you're welcome to leave them in the comments. You're welcome to email me as well. Visit that Explore page for more details and to view our past videos. I want to say thank you very much. Y'all have a great rest of your day.